Hello, everyone. This is the 33rd episode of the Soccernostalgia Talk Podcast. As always, this is Sean from Los Angeles, and I am joined by Paul from Shipley in England. We are pleased to have Mr. Franco Spicciariello back on our podcast. We continue our interview series with Mr. Spicciariello as we discuss the matches of the Italian Serie A for the season of 1983-84. Last time in our 82-83 season episode, AS Roma, led by World Cup 82 heroes Paolo Roberto Falcao and Bruno Conti, had won the Scudetto for the first time since 1942. Juventus, and most particularly Michel Platini's revival, had been too late to stop the Giallorossi from winning. This new season once again promised to be a duel between the two rivals. This season also marked the return of former giant AC Milan and Lazio to the Serie A. Of course, the Italian headlines in the preseason always concern the calcio mercato and the transfer activity, as well as the death of the UEFA president, the Italian Artemio Franchi, on August 12th, 1983. But before we get to the action on the field, let's discuss the teams and the significant transfer activity. The Italian FA president, Federico Sordillo, had brought forward the transfer deadline by 2 weeks. This made the transfers of Zico to Udinese and Cerezo to AS Roma invalidated for the time being. The Zico's transfer to Udinese had gone through Zanussi, which was, the Udinese president, Lamberto Mazza, was affiliated to Zanussi Corporation that made the Zico transfer possible. And there are rules that there could be no third-party involvement in transfers. As far as Cerezo, he was not signed before the transfer deadline. An inquiry commission was set up by the Italian Olympic Committee to clear the Zico and Cerezo transfers.
In this way, it sounds really easy. You have no idea what happened in those days in the country, especially in Udine, which is in northeast of the country, close to the border with Austria. The people, thousands and thousands of people marched on the streets saying, or Zico or Austria. We're going to leave the country. Really. And I tell you, there was a direct intervention of the president of the republic on the president of the federation to change the landscape, because it was a huge, huge political mess. A lot that anybody can think about. Let's remember that at the time, Zico was the best player in the world, more than Diego Maradona in that moment. It was really the white Pelé.
Let's start with defending champions AS Roma, still managed by Niels Lidholm. As far as new transfers or new players coming on, you do have Cerezo from Atletico Mineiro, one of the heroes of Brazil in 1982 World Cup. Another 1982 World Cup player, Francesco Graziani, joined from Fiorentina. Other players to come on board were defender Dario Bonetti of Sampdoria, Emilio Odi of Verona, backup goalkeeper Asutio Malliolio of Pistoiese, and Mark Strukelj of Triestina. Cerezo came on board, so Herbert Prohaska had to leave and he joined Austria Vienna. So AS Roma was strengthened further and were already a good team. And as far as the players on the roster, you have Franco Tancredi in goal, now Dario Bonetti in defense, Aldo Maldera, Sebastiano Nella, Michele Nappi, Odi, Ubaldo Rieti, Carlo Ancelotti, Cerezo strengthening the midfield. You still have Bruno Conti, the late Agostino Di Bartolomei, Paolo Roberto Falcao, Graziani, and Pruzzo.
Yep.
And during the season, you would have future stars like Giuseppe Giannini, Stefano Desideri, and Fabrizio Di Mauro also as part of the team.
Coming up from the U team, yes.
Yes.
The Primavera.
The closest challengers, Juventus of manager Giovanni Trapattoni. Roberto Bettega, we mentioned last time, left to join the Canadian League, and Dino Zoff retired.
Please, sorry, Sean, the
right.
North American Soccer League.
Oh.
He moved to the Toronto Blizzard.
Oh, yes.
Yes, where he reached Francesco Morini, another old-timer of Juventus, who just left the Toronto. He went there because he wanted to learn the language, learn management style. And he did it, I'd say.
To replace Dino Zoff in goal, they brought on Stefano Tacconi from Avellino, who would be a mainstay of Juventus until 1992. Another player joining from Avellino, who would in a way become the surprise of the season, would be Beniamino Vignola. Not much was expected of him. He seemed like a peripheral figure, but he actually played a key role for Juventus during this season.
Both in winning the Scudetto and in winning the Cup Winners' Cup.
Yes. You also have Nicola Caricola from Bari.
If you remember, he later moved to Major League Soccer, and he played the first game with the New York Metro Stars at the time, and they called it the Curse of Caricola, with an own goal that set the pace for New York. They never won anything since then.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Roberto Tavola coming from Lazio. And to replace Beteca up front, they brought Domenico Penzo from Verona. The star-studded Juventus had as its two foreigners, Michel Platini and Zbigniew Boniek of Poland. We mentioned that Platini in the second half of the season had just been excellent and found his feet late in the season, and it continued into this season where he would have perhaps his greatest ever season as a footballer. Juventus, as far as the lineup, you have Tacconi in goal now. In the defense, still had Claudio Gentile, Antonio Cabrini, Gaetano Scirea, and Sergio Brio. You still had Massimo Bonini, Marco Tardelli, Boniek we mentioned, and Paolo Rossi up front. And you still had Beppe Furino in the lineup. Yeah. We'll talk about him at the end of the season. Yes.
Yes, and he ended playing only a few minutes in the last game of the season to get his 8th Scudetto with Juventus, a record that was beaten only recently by Gigi Buffon. Just one point about Juventus, because the coach was Giovanni Trapattoni, was very famous for being very tough on defense, but the truth is that he always had the great defenders. That was the point, because if you think about it, if you want to consider today's games, he was playing with a 4-2-3-1 with Bonini and Tardelli running with 3 Penzo on the right, Boniek on the left, with Cabrini and Gentile going on the sides, and with Platini behind Paolo Rossi. So if you think about it, it's a very attacking style in terms of players. It's more the reputation that Trapattoni got than the reality.
Yes, and that's a separate discussion. The whole Trapattoni versus Sacchi zonal system, that's a whole debate in itself. Now we come to Inter. Inter were to be led on the bench by Luigi Radice, former AC Milan great player. Now, before the season, AC Milan president Giuseppe Farina had said that with Radic, Inter would get relegated. He tried to insult him in some ways. As far as the new players coming aboard for Inter, you had the Belgian midfielder, the late Ludo Queck, coming from Anderlecht, Giancarlo Pazinato coming from AC Milan, Carlo Muraro from Ascoli, and Aldo Serena coming back from loan from AC Milan.
Same for Carlo Muraro, who used to play already for Inter in the past when he won the Scudetto in 79-80.
Oh, so he was returning as well. Inter, they had sent Ivano Bordon to Sampdoria. Yeah. So the new starter in goal was Walter Zenga, and he would be their starter until 94. So you had Zenga, Beppe Baresi, brother of Franco, Giuseppe Bergomi, Zio, Graziano Bini, Fulvio Colovati, Riccardo Ferri, Salvatore Bagni, Evaristo Beccalossi, the underrated number 10, Enrico Cucchi, Giampiero Marini, the West German midfielder Hansi Müller in his second season. We mentioned Pazinato, Antonio Sabato, Alessandro Spilo Altobelli up front with Serena and Muraro. So a strong team. as well.
Yeah, but for the second year, the huge misunderstanding of having both Becalossi and Hansi Müller playing together.
Yes. And also Ludo Quick would have a very bad season as well.
For
and
me, yeah.
He would, at the end of the season, he would be on his way to Ascoli on loan. We come to the return of AC Milan to Serie A after a season in the Serie B.
His second season, yeah.
Second season Serie B, yes.
In its history. But came back, the second time was relegated on the field, right? The first time was relegated because of a bad
Totonero
in 1980, yeah.
Yeah, so they had the 1980 Totonero scandal that led to their first relegation. Then they came back up, and for 81-82 season, they were actually relegated for poor results. But now they were back, and their manager was Ilario Castanier. They signed Belgian defender Eric Gerrits from Standard Liège. We will get to him in the second half of the season. Luther Blissett, English forward from Watford. He'd been the top goal scorer in England the previous season. He was a big signing at the time. Many goals were expected of him, but unfortunately, he would turn out to be one of the much referenced worst transfers in Italian football history.
He was announced as a superstar here. And one of his statements, I still remember this, it was like, yeah, well, I'm famous for wasting a lot of goals, but you know what? Out of 10, I waste 7, but then I scored the other 3. He forgot about the other 3 when he joined AC Milan in Italy, unfortunately. And also, it was never clear what kind of striker he was. Like a lone striker, a striker used to go back and help the team. Nobody could understand it. And, people have been even too patient with him.
Paul, you might know about this. Apparently, this is what I read. AC Milan had initially wanted Norman Whiteside, and Ron Atkinson was willing to sell him to get the money to sign Alan Brazil. But Whiteside did not want to leave, so they had to turn to Luther Blissett.
Yeah, I have read about Whiteside, who at that time was more of a striker and later was more of a midfield player. But yeah, Blissett at that time, Watford had a great season, but he wasn't an experienced first division player. He'd come up through the divisions with Watford, and as Franco said, they were a team who created a lot of chances, and he was more of a poacher, I suppose, for them, but maybe not the most technical player in the world.
Over the years, there has been this conspiracy theory that they really wanted to sign John Barnes, but somehow they made a mistake and signed Blissett. But obviously that's not true, because Blissett had been a top goal scorer in England the previous season and an international.
Yeah, if I may, Sean, it wouldn't be news in Italy because something similar happened in 15 years later with Zeman, that he hired for AS Roma a very bad defender called Cesar Gomez. The reason was that he gave a call to Pierluigi Casiraghi, asking him who was the defender that played against us in Lazio and Tenerife. It was the year before. And Casiraghi answered, I think it was a Spaniard or something like that. The reality is that was the Argentinian Pablo Paz. But unfortunately, Zeman got Cesar Gomez, who played one game, a horrible game in a derby against Lazio, and never played again for the other 3 years, just getting a lot of money. He was hired by mistake. So things like this happen even in the 90s.
As far as Milan's other signings, you had Lucky Luciano Spinozzi from Verona, Andrea Manzo from Fiorentina, and Filippo Galli from Pescara. As far as the lineup, you had Franco Baresi, Mauro Tassotti, Albergo Evani, Filippo Galli Gerrits, we mentioned, Andrea Icardi, Spinozzi, Sergio Battistini, Vinicio Verza, Blissett, Oscar Damiani, and Giuseppe Incocciati. So for a promoted side, they seem to have decent players on the books. At this point, they were expected to stay up. Next, we come to Fiorentina, managed by Giancarlo De Sisti. They registered Giuseppe Oriali from Inter, Paolo Monelli from Ascoli, and another veteran, Paolo Pulici from Udinese. You still had Giovanni Galli in goal, Stefano Carobi, Renzo Contratto, Antonello Cucuredu, Argentina's World Cup captain Daniel Passarella, who had joined the previous season, Celeste Pin, Giancarlo Antonioni, Mario Bortolazzi, who would later join Milan and Genoa, very good free kicks, Daniele Massaro, Oriali, Eraldo Pecci, former Torino player, Daniel Bertoni, 1970 World Cup winner with Argentina, Monelli and Pulici.
So you got 5 world champions on the field. Because Passarella, Bertoni, Oriali, Massaro, and Antonioni. Think about it. You know, those years possibly has been the best decade for Fiorentina except for the 60s, because they've been on top of the list since 1980 with Picchio De Sisti. Very good mix of experience and youth. With Paolo Monelli was a great add to the team. He scored a lot of goals. But unfortunately, you know, in 83-84, they could have a role in the game for Scudetto, but the second and final injury for Giancarlo Antonioni was a huge, huge blow.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Next, we come to Napoli, managed by Pietro Santin. Rafael Di Fusco came on board from Vicenza, and he would remain as a substitute goalkeeper for the remainder of his time at Napoli. Luigi Caffarelli came from Cavese, and Brazilian Dirceu arrived from Verona.
Yeah.
You have players like Luciano Castellini in goal, Giuseppe Bruscolotti. Yes. Giuseppe Bruscolotti, Antonio Caranante, Moreno Ferrario, Dutchman Rudy Crowell was there for his last season in Italy, Caffarelli, Costanzo Celestini, Paolo Dal Fiume, Dirceu, and Antonio De Vitis as some of the more better-known players.
Sean, one thing about the second goalkeeper, Raffaele Di Fusco, is one of the last seasons of his career with Ottavio Bianchi. He entered the field as an attacker.
Yes. 88-89 season, yes. Because there were not enough players on the bench, apparently, and Ottavio Bianchi decided to send him on as a
the football we
player.
love. Yeah. When things like this could still happen.
Next, we come to Sampdoria with Renzo Ulvieri as manager. They signed Roberto Gallia from Como, Fausto Pari from Parma. He'd be a key player when they won the title in 91. Domenico Marocchino came from Juventus. He earned 1 cap for Italy in 1981, I believe. Yeah,
against Luxembourg. He was the one crossing for Collovati, who scored the winning goal that basically brought Italy to the World Cup.
Yes. Ivano Bordon came from Inter as goalkeeper. Pietro Viercovo returned from loan from Roma, much to Roma's detriment, obviously.
You know, Pietro Viercovo, he was bought by Mantovani, the president of Sampdoria, in 1980 from Como, and he was kept on loan for several years. So we discussed about this in the past. He went to Fiorentina, and Fiorentina almost won the Scudetto.
Right.
He went to Roma won the Scudetto. He went to Sampdoria, then Sampdoria won the Scudetto later. He went to Juventus when he was 36, and finally
he won
real Champions League.
Right. Sampdoria still had Liam Brady, the Irishman, and Trevor Francis, the Englishman, as their foreign players. Other players on the team, apart from Bordon and Pari we mentioned, we have Luca Pellegrini, Alessandro Renica, Viercovod, Francesco Casagrande. He used to play at Fiorentina at some point. Marocchino, Gallia, Alessandro Scanziani, and the young Roberto Mancini.
And if I may, one of the most talented Italian players of the 80s, Alviero Chiorri. The problem was crazy as a bull. He didn't have once he was called in the national team and he said he couldn't go because he had some minutes with his friends. He had to go out. Right. So he was an incredible player with Sampdoria, where he's still considered an idol. In Cremona with Cremonese, really, but a wasted talent.
Next we come to Torino, managed by Eugenio Bersellini.
The surgeon, the iron surgeon.
You have Giovanni Francini, came from Reggiana. He would later join Napoli with Maradona. Danilo Pileggi from Cagliari. Pietro Mariani from Catanzaro. and the Austrian Walter Schachner from Cesena. In goal, you have Giuliano Terraneo, Paolo Berruato, Giancarlo Corradini, who would also later join Napoli with Maradona, Luigi Danova, Francini, Roberto Galbiati, 1982 World Cup winner Giuseppe Dossena, Giacomo Ferri, who I believe is a brother of Riccardo Ferri of Inter.
Yeah.
The Argentine Patricio Hernandez, Pileggi, Renato Zaccarelli, 1978 World Cup player for Italy, Antonio Comi, Mariani, Schachner, and 1982 World Cup winner Franco Selvaggi. Next, we come with Udinese, with their signing of Zico from Flamengo that made all the headlines. Zico would be an excellent signing for that season, one of the best seasons for any foreigner in Italian football. Udinese were managed by Enzo Ferrari. Apart from Zico, they signed Loris Pradella from Monza, future international Luigi De Agostini from Catanzaro, and Alberto Marchetti from Cagliari.
Yeah, well, I would say that despite some great results for Udinese in around 2010, at the time of Biro, Famoroso, I still think this was possibly, from a technical point of view, the best Udinese ever. The four in the front, Zico, Pirdis, Causio, and Massimo Mauro, I don't think they ever had something like this. Really, it's a really top team from this point of view. Edinho, another World Cup veteran from Brazil, and Luigi D'Agostini went on substituting Antonio Caprini at Juventus, and the national team.
They also had future Roman Manuel Gerolin, Paolo Miano, Franco Causio playing his last season from Udinese.
Baron.
Then we come to the surprise of the previous season, Verona, of Osvaldo Bagnoli. They signed Mauro Ferroni from Sampdoria, Silvano Fontolan from Como, Massimo Storgato from Juventus, future manager Francesco Guidoline from Bologna, Giuseppe Galderisi from Juventus, Maurizio Iorio from Roma, the Scottish striker Joe Jordan from AC Milan, and Stefano Rebonato from Cremonese.
Who went on becoming the top scorer in Serie B with Pescara, having, one-hit wonder and never showed up again.
In the top division, right.
And Antonio Di Gennaro then became a really great regista.
Yes.
Became the new number 10 of the Italian national team. Roberto Tricella, the new libero behind Scirea.
Yes.
And the goalkeeper, Claudio Garella.
Yes.
From a style point of view, possibly the most horrible goalkeeper ever seen in Serie A, but one of the most effective. He could save with every piece of his body. You didn't know how he could do that, but he was never in the right position, but he was always there with the foot, with the hand, with the arm, whatever. If you look at him, it's unbelievable. And he was always overweight. Kind of Pete Schrijvers, the Dutch.
And he won Scudettos not only with Verona, but with Diego Maradona at Napoli.
Exactly.
At Verona, you still had Vladislav Zmuda, Polish defender, as the other foreigner, along with Joe Jordan. It was a team that was building up, and the following season they would win the Scudetto, but that's another story. You still had other players like Domenico Volpati and Luigi Sacchetti as part of the backbone of the team. Next, we come to Ascoli, managed by veteran manager Carlo Mazzone.
Cool. Historical. I love it. I love that guy.
They signed the Yugoslav Alexander Trifunovic from Partizan Belgrade, the Brazilian Huari from Inter, Antonio Dell'Olio from Trento, and Carlo Perrone from Lazio. Other players in the team, the recognizable players would be Andrea Mandorlini, who would join Inter.
And won the Scudetto in 89, signing very important goals.
Yes. Walter De Vecchi, Giuseppe Iacchini, who's now manager, Enrico Nicolini, who I believe would join Atalanta later on, Walter Novellino, another manager.
Novellino and De Vecchi won together the Scudetto of the Star with AC Milan in 1979. And Novellino had possibly his last great season of his career. And Juari, he went on winning the Champions Cup with Porto together with Rabat Majer.
In 1987, yes.
Yes.
So next we come to Avellino, managed by Fernando Veneranda, who will be
He didn't
sacked.
last that much.
Right. He'll be sacked on November 21st, replaced by Ottavio Bianchi. They signed Argentine striker Ramon Diaz from Napoli.
Just to stop you here, would you think about names like this? A World Cup level player like Ramon Diaz playing for a small team like Avellino. The problem is that a player like this today, he wouldn't play in a small team, not even in England, where they could pay him. The problem is that today, all the big teams, they collect so many players that they drain all the talent, all the available talent for the smaller team. That's why there is no more competition. That's one of the issues. Here you could see Ramon Diaz, but also Geronimo Barbadillo, for example. It was a very good team at the time. So, sorry.
No, go ahead. No, that's, in fact, even in our England podcast last time, we mentioned that there was a better spread of a talent between the teams and the league was actually competitive, unlike today. All the leagues, in fact. But getting back to this, apart from Ramon Diaz, Avellino signed Pietro Maiellaro from Varese, he would join Bari and Fiorentina later on. Franco Colomba from Bologna, and future international Fernando De Napoli from Rimini. You have, as part of the lineup, Luciano Favero, future Juventus defender. Bruno Limido, yes. Colomba, De Napoli, Maiellaro, Geronimo Barbadillo, the Peruvian that you mentioned, and Ramon Diaz.
And by the way, Geronimo Barbadillo, he still lives in Italy because he then moved to Udinese and he opened a pizza place in Udine. Everybody loved him.
There's a famous photograph of him in Guerin Sportivo with a full native Indian regalia. Have you seen that? It's one of the most famous photographs.
With the afro head.
Yeah. Yes. Next, we come to newly promoted Catania, managed by Gianni Di Marzio. They signed two Brazilians, Luis Pedrinho of Vasco da Gama, who was on the 1982 World Cup squad, and Donizete Luvanor from Goiás.
Di Marzio, he didn't learn the lesson. In 1980, he was the coach of Pistoiese. So he traveled to Brazil to sign a Brazilian attacker, Brazilian striker. And it seems like that one of the teams set up a game for a striker called Luis Silvio, who wasn't really a striker. But in that game, it was great because everybody was playing for him. Even the other team was going to get a bunch of the money. So, and he brought Luis Silvio here. It was, unfortunately, it was not even at the Serie B level player. This time, again, at least on paper, they looked better. Pedrinho and Luvanor. Luvanor was a Brazilian under-20 player, but it didn't work again.
Pedrinho had stated that professionally, it was a step back to sign for Catania. But financially, this was an offer that he could not refuse. So, do you remember the most recognizable player for Catania that season that we would know today?
Oh, Claudio Ranieri.
Yes.
Obviously.
Yes.
Former Catanzaro. I think it was possibly his last season.
I think so. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. We come to Genoa, managed by the late Luigi Simoni. They signed Nazareno Canuti from AC Milan, Roberto Bergamaschi from Inter. They signed a Brazilian, Francisco Eloy from Vasco da Gama.
Very bad.
And Roberto Policano from a squad called Latina. In goal, they had Silvano Martina, who we mentioned last time, injured Antonioni 2 years before in a very serious manner. So Canuti, you have Mario Facenda, Paolo Benedetti, the Dutchman Jan Peters, still on their books. Up front, you have Massimo Briaschi, who the following season would join Juventus. Now we come to newly promoted Lazio with Giorgio Chinali as president.
Can I get in here? Can I step in?
Of course, please go ahead.
Lazio came back after 3 years spent in Serie B. There were a lot of expectation with Giorgio Chinaglia. It was at the moment that the owner of both the Cosmos, who went on being demised, and Lazio. He got promised from Warner Communications and Coca-Cola that he could have a lot of money to spend on Lazio, and it seems like that he was going to have Zico or Junior for the team, which didn't happen because Junior ended to Torino the year after, thanks to Luciano Moggi, the infamous manager that was able to build it in this way, while Zico seems like the money wasn't there. So Lazio ended getting Joao Batista. The problem is that he bought him as a regista, while he used to be more like a mediano, playing in front of the defense, covering. Even if, in that role, he was the best of Brazil in 1978, but it was exactly 5 years before. Also, he got on loan from Juventus, the young Danish star Michael Laudrup, which wasn't bad. A few other players like Angelo Cupini, a right wing from Cavese in Serie B. But more than everything else, it was the year of the revenge for Bruno Giordano, the striker, and Lionello Manfredonia, the defender, who had been disqualified for 2 years after the Totonero scandal, and they were back the year before in Serie B to help Lazio getting promoted again. So, but let's say that on paper, it was a very good team. Unfortunately, it was a team that had to suffer until the very last minute of the season.
The beginning of the season, they were led on the bench by Giancarlo Morrone.
The Gaucho.
But he'll be replaced by Paolo Carozzi during the season.
Yeah, Chinaglia, he had so much love for Lazio and his fan. He could never be very objective, very cold in making decisions, always listening to the wrong advice or the wrong people. And it was always very emotional. So he made decisions like this. So Lazio lost in Naples and said, get Carozzi in. The other year, he did the same. After 2 games, Carozzi out, back Juan Carlos Lorenzo. Chinaglia was great. As he was great on the field, he was bad as a manager, unfortunately.
We should mention that Michael Laudrup had almost joined Liverpool that summer before signing for Lazio.
He signed for Juventus. He was
right.
Chinaglia got him because he spoke with Gianni Agnelli and Giampiero Boniperti, and he said, "This is a great talent. We want it. We don't have the money." So Juventus stepped in, leaving him for 2 seasons to Lazio, because part of the deal was to then sell Bruno Giordano and Lionello Manfredonia to Juventus, but that didn't happen. Sometimes the calciomercato goes its own way.
Right. And we should mention that Batista had come from Palmeiras. And another recognizable face that was at Lazio was Vincenzo D'amico.
The real captain, the real flag of the team. He's been there forever. He saved Lazio in 1980. In 84-85, the Lazio was going to be relegated to Serie C. He was there. He was always there.
Finally, we come to Pisa. They were managed by Bruno Pace, but during the season, he'd be replaced by Luis Vinicio. They signed Antonio Crisciamani from Napoli. Dutch striker Wim Kieft arrived from Ajax. Patrizio Sala was loaned by Fiorentina. They still had Danish player Klaus Berggren on their books, but it was always going to be struggle for Pisa, no matter what.
I tell you, a team like this in today's Serie A would be in the top 10. You would never see a low-level team having a striker like Kieft, midfielders like Berggren, or even Crisciamani or Roberto Scarnecchia, and Patrizio Sala, the brother of
Claudio Sala.
Torino, Claudio Sala. You don't see something. Alessandro Mannini was a great goalkeeper. So really, it's unfortunately the level went really down.
Yes, that's for sure. The season finally gets started. First day of the season was September 12th. Now, we mentioned earlier that Michel Platini had struggled early on in the first season at Juventus. This season, he was informed from the opening kick of the season. Yep. For the very first match of the season, Juventus made a statement of purpose by defeating Ascoli 7-0, with Platini scoring twice. That's obviously a rare score anywhere, but especially in Italy. Also, most importantly, at Genoa, Udinese defeated Genoa 5-0, and Zico scoring twice, and he also made his presence felt right from the beginning.
Can I tell you a story very quick about this? When he was playing there, there was a free kick. The entire stadium was standing and chanting, Zico, Zico, Zico. Zico ended crying because even the Genoa fans were cheering for Zico, even if they were losing, just to see him scoring. And he did a wonderful free kick there. So it was incredible. I've never seen in Serie A, maybe only when Juventus fans cheered Ronaldo after his bicycle kick in Champions League 3 years ago. But something like that in the Italian championship, I've never seen it before.
Or when Real Madrid fans applauded Ronaldinho in 2005 when he scored a solo goal. Yeah, something similar. Yeah. Juventus came out from the start, as did Roma. Around match day 4, Juventus would be on top after defeating Lazio 1-0 at Roma. They followed that the following week with another key win for match day 5 against Milan, when they won 2-1. Around match day 6 and match day 7, Juventus would suffer 2 consecutive losses. First, they would lose in the Torino derby against Torino on October 23rd, 2-1. The following week, they would lose at home to Sampdoria 2-1 as well. Roma took advantage of those losses when they defeated Lazio in the Roma derby, and also they defeated Napoli 5-1 in the following week to go on top on match day 7 with 12 points. Like we said earlier, it always seemed likely it was going to be another Rome versus Juventus matchup for the Scudetto, and you could already tell. Juventus would bounce back, and as would Roma, and they would keep pace with one another. I want to ask you, if you remember this, in November, Rita Antonioni caused controversy by attacking Fiorentina manager De Sisti and saying that if the team's play continued as is, Antonioni would give up the captaincy. This controversy continued to such a point that Fiorentina had to send a communique saying that they support manager De Sisti.
Well, no, let's say that the main controversy at the time was that it was a lady, a woman, talking about tactics and football. And I tell you, if you read
like a Vanda Nara ahead of his time.
Yeah, but if you read some of those reactions of the time today, it would cause a huge controversy. If we talk about matches today, obviously we are talking about 35 years ago in Italy. It was a totally different world. A woman could not talk about football or tactics at the time.
No Diletta Leota at the time?
Not at all. Not at all. No, seriously, one of the issues was that Fiorentina used to play with Paolo Monelli as a central striker, with 2 wings that were Daniele Massaro and Riccardo Bertoni. The problem was that in that case, Antonioni had to cover, and he didn't want to do that. That was his issue, basically. So he was playing with a 4-3-3, and with a 4-3-3, the number 10 doesn't go that far. He has to stay a little bit back. So that was the problem he had with De Sisti.
We come to the much anticipated Juventus and Roma matchup on match day 11. This is on December 4th. At this point, Juventus and Verona have each 14 points at the top. So this match ended as 2-2. And this was a good point by Roma away at Juventus.
Roma was winning, went ahead. Then in 5 minutes, Juventus was ahead. And then at the last minute, Roberto Pruzzo, the striker, I think he scored the best goal of his life in a wonderful bicycle kick. Right. Really wonderful bicycle kick.
And Platini's free kick goal is also one of those much replayed goals of Platini in Serie A. It was a wonderful free kick.
Yeah.
And we should mention that in a few weeks' time, Michel Platini would be the Ballon d'Or. And it just confirmed his growing reputation in Serie A and at a more global stage at this point. At this point, again, Juventus was on top by 15 points, but he had a number of like five teams, only 1 point behind. Back then, Serie A was very tight.
Yeah, it was like Roma, Juventus, Torino, Verona, Sampdoria, Fiorentina.
Yes.
And then Milan Inter was very competitive season.
Yes. It would be on match day 13, December 18th, when Juventus took a significant step in gaining the Scudetto when they defeated Inter. One of the goals coming from Platini, again, we mentioned he was in this form of his life at this point. So Juventus took the lead, and at this point, even though they're only maybe 1 point ahead of most of teams, it looked like they could win the title because defeating Inter was one of their historical rivals, was a big deal, was another statement of purpose, so to speak. In the same month, actually on the same day when Juventus defeated Inter, for Lazio's match against Udinese, Giorgio Chinaglia would enter the field like a number of times. Eventually, this would lead for him to be suspended from the bench for like 2 months.
I'm a direct witness. I was there with my grandfather during that game. It was a horrible game. The referee should have been arrested. It came out later that he did it on purpose. So basically, to give you the idea, Lazio was winning. In one of the last few minutes, there was a free kick for Udinese. So basically, the referee Menicucci from Florence, he put himself in front of Lazio barrier, and Udinese scored. Unbelievable. So Giorgio Chinaglia tried to get onto the field because he knew Menicucci from the time when he was playing. The guy was very bad. I mean, Menicucci, the referee. The point is that he became famous because he was trying to get on the field with an umbrella in his hand. So with like 5 people keeping you, Chinaglia was big, very big. His name was Long John. So, and I tell you, it's been a very, very tough moment. It was a risk of an invasion of the field by the fans. It was a horrible day, really. We really felt that the federation, the league wanted to have Lazio relegated at that moment because it really looked like there was the will of somebody. You don't do a mistake like that. It was the entire game pushing against Lazio.
In the same month, there's another incident that made the headlines. Claudio Gentile was injured by Marco Tardelli in a Juventus training session. For some reason, this made a lot of headlines because usually it was other way around. Other players were usually victims of Gentile. I was reading France Football, and for weeks this was making headline, and it's just something that stood out. We're nearing the halfway point of the season, and on match day 15, Juventus firmly established themselves at the top after a 4-2 win at Genoa. And at this point, Torino was their nearest challengers with 2 points behind.
If I may, Sean, there was also a reason why Roma started to have some issues. The first one, obviously, the Champions Cup was draining resources from the team, where Roma kept advancing. But on the other side, there was a big blow, was the injury to Carlo Ancelotti. That was huge. So, and these two things together became a problem for AS Roma in a time in which the teams were not so big like today.
I mean, they still were near the top, but like you said, this affected them for a few matches and they lost ground that they eventually would not be able to make up.
Especially with just 2 points for every victory.
Right.
Like today. You don't have time to recover.
Exactly. And it was at this point also midway point that Bruno Pace resigned at Pisa and replaced by Luis Vinicio. The new year 1984 starts, and on January 18th, Ivano Frezzoli stepped down as Inter president. The new president was now Ernesto Pellegrini. Frezzoli had been president since 1968 after the end of the Angelo Moratti era. Under his presidency, Inter won the Scudetto in 1971 and 1980, the Coppa Italia in 78 and 82. That was a new era at Inter. By matchday 17, Juventus had established a 3-point lead over Torino. They would continue to hold on to their lead. Matchday 19, Roma defeated Torino 2-1. And this was essentially the end of the Torino challenge for the Scudetto. And they would lose ground after this. And by now, at match day 19, you have Juventus has 28 points and Fiorentina has 25 points. It's around this time that Antonioni suffers his injury against Sampdoria. Like you said, it would affect Fiorentina and their chances. Another news in this month was Rudy Crowell's troubles at Napoli. And he was quoted as saying, either the club get rid of Santin or I'll walk out. Though obviously after Napoli's loss to Avellino in this match day 19, Santin was sacked and Rino Marchesi was called in as manager. Another coaching news during this season, AC Milan president Farina, he offered Castaniere a new contract for the following season. When Castaniere did not sign it immediately, he withdrew the offer and suspended him. And it turned out that Castaniere had actually been approached by neighbors Inter and would be their manager for the following season. We come to match day 20, February 19th. This is a significant match day in the Italian football history. Do you know for what reason? Well, as far as matches, Juventus defeated Milan 3-0 to maintain their lead at the top by 4 points now over Roma and Torino. But why do you think this match day is important for Italy?
This I don't remember.
There was not a single tied match. So, which is a significant, well, I think it would be significant anywhere, but especially in Italy.
Well, that year, Serie A had 100 goals more than a year before. So it was complete. All these foreigners, everything was changing. Just before Sacchi was already changing the approach of the teams. I remember the late 70s, early 80s, Serie A was like, you could see like 6-7 ties. 1-1, 0-0. It was horrible sometimes. Now it was already changing. When you have people like Zico on the field and Falcao, everything changes. I have a question for Paul. When was that in England they started to have 3 points for a victory?
Just a little bit
82.
before. Yeah, 81.
82 season,
Yeah, because I remember, reading Guerin Sportivo and understanding how this was already changing English football. Having 3 points for a victory. So the teams really tried to win every game. It was better than time.
Yeah, definitely made a big difference.
Another incident in this match day 19, Pisa defeated Catania 2-0. At this point, Catania were dead last. During the match, Catania president Massimino, yes, I'm sorry. He was suspended for a year after being sent off and inciting his players to leave the field.
I'll tell you a funny thing about Massimino. Was a very peculiar old-style Italian president. Or those are more like 60s, 70s. So once during an interview, he was asked, "So, Mr. President, it seems like that the club is missing amalgam. Oh, where does this guy play?" You understand that?
So we come to match day 21 with Juventus taking on Torino, one of their nearest challengers. This would be another match that would cement Michel Platini and one of his greatest seasons that we mentioned. Juventus defeated Torino 2-1, both goals coming from Platini. And we mentioned how Zico had taken on to the Serie A and just scoring goals right and left. With these 2 goals, Platini and Zico each had 17 goals as capocannoniere. With this win, at this point, Juventus had a 5-point lead over Roma. And we talked about in those days of 2 points for a win, that was a significant gap. And already it looked like Juventus was going to win the title. So this was a key match in establishing Juventus as title favorites. A few days later, a scandal would rock Belgian football. The Standard Liège and Waterschei scandal. And this involved AC Milan's Eric Gerrits, who was basically the ringleader in this bribery scandal. He would be suspended in Belgium. The interesting thing is that his suspension did not apply to Italian football, but Milan president Farino decided that given Milan's recent scandals, they should just do the safe thing and basically wash their hands of Gareth and suspend him themselves. He was gone for the season. For Milan, their experiences with the Stranieri that season were very negative and very disappointing. Gareth would eventually rebuild his career and all that. We joined PSV Eindhoven and eventually in a couple years' time.
But at the same time was the big chance for Mauro Tassotti to become a star as a right back.
Yes.
Because when he joined AC Milan in 1980 from Lazio, he was 19. Now he was a more mature player and he became possibly the best right back in Italy for like 15 years. Unfortunately, becoming a member of the national team only when he was like 34 with the World Cup that ended in a very bad way on the nose of Luis Enrique.
Yes. In fact, Tassotti was Italy's oldest debutant in 1992 when Sacchi selected him. Juventus would continue to be the leader, but Roma was slowly coming back. On match day 23, Juventus lost at Verona and Roma defeated Udinese. This actually narrowed the gap between the teams to 2 points. So now it was getting closer. Even though Juventus still had the lead and looked likely winners, Roma still had a chance to make up the deficit. But like you said, they'd be busy with the Champions Cup. Maybe that's why they were not able to catch up. Although Juventus themselves, they were also busy in Europe as well. So who knows?
Well, Cup Winners' Cup was not absolutely at the same level. So, UEFA Cup sometimes was even harder than the Champions Cup. Because you had the winners of that year playing usually in UEFA Cup. So they were stronger than usually the team in Champions Cup.
Yes.
But Cup Winners' Cup was obviously a lower level.
Also, in the month of March, the Karl-Heinz Rummenigge transfer to Inter was announced. At the time, this was very big news that West German star, double Ballon d'Or winner, was going to join the Serie A. Interestingly, according to Fiorentina, he had signed for them or had agreed to sign for them, but later on had changed his mind. They accused him of going back on his word. In the same month, Fiorentina also criticized Daniel Bertoni, calling him a mercenary. They said that he only plays well when his replacement is announced in the press.
It's always a wonderful climate in Florence. They tend to victimize themselves a little bit. I like Fiorentina in general, but I think they still live in some kind of grandeur of the 60s when they reached the Champions Cup final against Real Madrid. They won 2 Scudettos. They won the Cup Winners' Cup. Yeah. And they feel they're still like a great team, which they haven't been for 4 years, at least, except for maybe one season with Batistuta when they won at Arsenal, this kind of thing. But they've never been. So it's very harsh on players, and it happens often that for some reason they're chasing a player. It seems like that this player is signing for them, and all of a sudden this player goes to another team. Last example was Sergei Milinkovic-Savic. He was introduced at the stadium of Florence. He was visiting the stadium. He started to cry, and the very same night he went to Lazio because he wanted to go there. I said, I don't want to go to Florence. I want to go to Rome. So it's really happened several times in the last 34 years.
Yeah, and there seems to be this, historically, this continuous conspiracy about how Juventus won the title on the last day of the 1981-82 season. I mean, to this day, it's often referenced as a reason why their animosity with Juventus.
I understand that. I tell you that a few years ago came out a book from an important journalist. They made an analysis going championship by championship, every single game, analyzing the games. And he basically realized that Juventus in a normal world would have won at least 15 Scudettos less than it did, than it should have. Yeah.
That in this way, Ray John. Yeah.
We call it, does it make sense? Subditancy, meaning that they feel the referees, they feel subject to a big team like Juventus. Okay. So they don't, they usually they tend to give like penalties that are not supposed to be penalties, or that they will not give to a smaller team and things like this. Also because Juventus being very powerful, if they complain against the referee, then the referee is not going to get the big games. So sometimes they feel like it's better to help the big team. Just think about one thing, 84-85, Verona wins the Scudetto, so a provincial team. That's the only team in Serie A history in which the referees have been picked in this way, not appointed by a referee person in charge. So it gives you the idea. And everybody still saying, why don't we pick the referees against in this way? It's true that the big games should be refereed by the best referees. That's true. But it seems like that we have a problem with them. It is what it is.
Speaking of Juventus and Fiorentina, on match day 25, they would face off and Juventus would win with a last-minute penalty kick. So, and on the same day, Rome would defeat Inter.
Scored by Beniamino Vignola. But one point, that he was not in charge of the penalty kicks. Obviously, it was Platini. He was injured, was not on the field. So the number 2 was supposed to be Boniek. Boniek got scared, and Vignola stepped in with his left foot. That was possibly the goal that gave Juventus the championship, because then the week after there was Roma Juventus.
Yes.
Final.
Exactly. This would be on match day 26 on April 15th. And this was billed as Roma's last final chance to have any chance to win the title. Well, at this point, Juventus was ahead by 3 points over Roma.
Watch out, because the problem for Roma was also that this game came like 4 days later after the semi-final. Roma lost in Scotland.
It's Dundee United. Yes.
2-0.
Yes.
So it was not really in the best mindset in approaching this game, because, you're on the edge of the final, you lose 2-0, and then you have to play the Scudetto against Juventus.
Yes.
Kind of tough.
Also, we should mention that Roma had not defeated Juventus for 5 years in Rome. And in fact, in the previous 4 years, they had lost these matches. Giovanni Trapattoni was confident that this was a step forward towards the Scudetto. However, when some reporters prematurely congratulated him for winning the title, he uttered his famous saying, "Non si dice gatto se non l'hai nel sacco." You can say it better.
Cat, if you don't have it already in the bag. That's the sense. Yes. It's that you got the cat only when you catch it for real.
Yes, that's a famous saying of his. But obviously, you can say it better in Italian if you would, please.
Non dire gatto se non l'hai nel sacco.
Perfect. So this is one of his famous sayings of Trapattoni. So with 3 points and 3 matches left, actually 4 matches left, Juventus seemed set to winning the title. They would gain another point the following week with the Platini and Zico matchup in Juventus versus Udinese. But once again, it would be Vignola who was having a magnificent end of a season in the league and in Europe when he scored 2 of Juventus's goals in a 3-2 win. We should also mention that this season, Paolo Rossi was also doing well after a disappointing post-World Cup season. He had a good season that season. I think he scored like 13 goals.
I believe it was his last great season. Because think about that. In 82-83, he basically arrived to the season having played only 3 games in the previous Serie A and then the World Cup. He had not played for 2 years and more. So it's not easy to regain the form. And also playing Sunday and Wednesday in the Champions Cup. This time he had a full training season in the summertime, and he had this possibly last great season. Also, he did not get injured because he had serious problems with his knees. Even today, he tells stories that if he knees down, he cannot really stand up again. He needs help. He always had problems. It's like Roberto Baggio has the same issues.
With Juventus's win and Roma dropping a point at Avellino, Juventus had now 4 points over Roma with 3 matches left. We come to match day 28.
Derby d'Italia.
So Derby d'Italia between Inter and Juventus.
Also Milan. Because it used to be between the only two teams that never got relegated.
That's right. Until
then another scandal came, Juventus over.
This one, Juventus would win away. Platini scoring again. I think this was his 20th goal of the season. So he would be capocannoniere. Juventus would win this match, and effectively they sealed the title, even though there were still 2 matches to play and 4 points. The title was mathematically won the following week, match day 29, May 6th, when Juventus at home tied with Avellino to get the point that they needed. By doing so, they now had 43 points over Roma's 39 points and were champions. Interestingly, just ahead of this match, there was some controversy as Platini complained that Juventus were too defensive. Boniek reminded him in the press that he had not won anything in France, anything worthy of note in France, when he was free in his positioning. And Trapattoni also reminded him that Juventus has been the most efficient team in Italy of the last few years. But in any case, all that was forgotten in the glow of Juventus's Scudetto win. They regained the Scudetto, the last one, I guess, 2 years before 1982. In doing so, Platini became the second Frenchman to win the Scudetto since 1949 and Milo Bongiorno. And Trapattoni became the first manager to win 5 Scudetti. He had promised Furino that he would let him play part of his match so that he would win his 8th Scudetto to tie Ferrari's record.
Furino won his 8th Scudetto,
yes.
But the difference with Ferrari was that he won them all with one team.
Yes.
By the way, we need to remember that Giuseppe Furino was 36 at the time, was also a vice champion of the world because he played in Mexico 70 with Italy.
His first appearance with Juventus was in 1969, and this was his 361st match for Juventus. This would be his only appearance of the season.
He was a little bit mad at Juventus anyway, because he said he had different agreements, but then the year before, he found out that Bonini was going to be in the first 11 instead of him. So it was Trapattoni at the end, and Boniperti convincing him to stay another season to win his 8th Scudetto. Yes. So he didn't really accept getting older, honestly. Then it was Boniperti a few years later, in 1991, calling him to drive the youth academy of Juventus, and he won several titles.
At the time, we should be reminded that Juventus would also win the Cup Winners' Cup final against Porto, 2-1, with Vignola and Boniek scoring. This was Juventus's most successful season since 1977, when they also won the double, League title and the UEFA Cup.
And they eliminated Manchester United in the semifinals.
Yes, in the semifinals, yes.
So, I think Whiteside scored a goal in the second leg in Turin, if I remember well.
It was 1-1 at Manchester and 2-1 at Juventus, yes. So Juventus lost their last match of the season that was inconsequential.
It was a typical last game of the season because it was playing against Genoa. Genoa needed to win to avoid relegation. So let's say are those kind of tacit agreements that you do on the field. Otherwise, people get a revenge the following season on your legs. That's the way it works. But unfortunately for Genoa, and fortunately for Lazio tied 2-2 in Pisa, and because Lazio had won 2-1 against Genoa in their own game, Lazio stayed in Serie A and Genoa got relegated. Since then, Genoa fans hate Lazio for this reason. But at one point, one of the reasons Lazio got in that situation was that on December 30, Bruno Giordano, possibly the best striker of his generation, better than Paolo Rossi, Cruyff called him the only player he could recognize himself in. So, and I don't think Cruyff is a person who gives this kind of feedback for free. So he broke his leg because of an assassin fall made by Bogoni, a defender from Ascoli. And he was supposed to stay out 4 months. He got back 2 months later. And I still remember an interview by Zico that when he saw Giordano's leg, he got scared because basically his muscles were like half of normal because he came back too soon. He said, like, you're crazy. But he said, Giordano, look, I'm from Rome. I grew up with Lazio, and I owe everything to this team because it got relegated because of what I did during the Betis scandal and everything else. I helped them. So, and, it was obviously 50-60% of his best, but he scored the necessary goal to save Lazio. And I tell you, that day in Pisa, in the last game, I've seen something that I've never seen in my life in any other place. There were some accidents on the stands at the end of the first half. Then there was Giorgio Chinaglia, because police came and everything else. Giorgio Chinaglia went there under the stands. There were 10,000 Lazio fans. And I tell you, Giorgio Chinaglia spoke to them even without a megaphone. He only screamed. The entire stadium was in total silence. I was on the tribune with my grandfather and I could hear him speaking to the people. Can you imagine one person standing in front of the tribune and speaking to 10,000 people? That gives you the idea who Giorgio Chinaglia was for the Lazio fans at the time. And everybody ended crying because Lazio didn't get relegated and nobody could believe we could make it at that point. Because Genoa was winning against Juventus and nobody really expected that. It didn't make any sense from a technical point of view. It was an agreement. Fine.
Juventus were champions with 43 points ahead of Roma's 41 points. But although, like I say, it looks like it's all very close, but the very last match, Juventus didn't need to win. So it could have been up to 4 points difference between the two. Fiorentina, Inter followed Juventus, 36 points, 35 points, and made the UEFA Cup. Roma would win the Coppa Italia by defeating Verona. Yes.
Yeah. Let's remember the run of AS Roma to the final of the Champions Cup.
Oh yes,
this was the first time in which a team was playing on the home field, the final.
Yes.
It happened again with Bayern Munich. So, and it ended in the same way. The penalty kicks, the home team lost. Right. So it's but unfortunately for Roma, that day, Cerezo got cramps, Pruzzo had problems too, Falcao had issues to his knee. So it was a very good Liverpool, but Roma got unlucky with Conti and Graziani sending out the penalty kicks in the end. So
bad way to end the season from Roma, but just maybe less than a month later, they won the Coppa Italia against Verona. This was their third Coppa Italia win in like 4 years, I think. So that was like a specialty of them at the time. You have Catania, Pisa, and Genoa relegated. Platini will become capocannoniere with 20 goals. Zico with 19 goals just behind him.
There was also Paolo Rossi with 13.
13, yeah. So, and Iorio with 14.
Very good season. Yeah. Very good season. Massimo Briaschi then moved to Juventus and Paolo Monelli.
As far as the Juventus team, you have Tacconi, Claudio Gentile, Antonio Cabrini, Sergio Brio, Gaetano Scirea, Massimo Bonini, Domenico Penzo, Marco Tardelli, Paolo Rossi, Platini, Boniek. In the second half of the season, Vignola would be part of the starting squad and played other matches. Nicola Caricola, Cesar Prandelli, Luciano Bodini would, as a backup goalkeeper, would make a few appearances. And we mentioned Furino with his loan match. It was a balanced side. It was probably even though they would win the title in 1986, it was probably the last great Trapattoni Juventus side.
Yes. Well, it ended, that cycle of Juventus ended with Platini, basically.
Yes.
When Platini left, Juventus had not been able to find a substitute. You can really substitute Platini. So they tried first with Marino Magrin from Atalanta, huge mistake. Then they tried with the Russian Alexei Zamarov, and it didn't work. So it took several years for Juventus to be back.
Almost a decade.
Yes.
As far as the departures for this season, we mentioned Beppe Furino retired. Also, Claudio Gentile left Juventus to join Fiorentina for the following season. Bertoni left Fiorentina and joined Napoli. Salvatore Bagni left Inter to join Maradona at Napoli. And we should mention this is the last season pre-Maradona. Aldo Serena joined Torino from Inter. I'm assuming it would have been on loan. Serena's transfer to Torino, that was on loan, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yeah. Ruud Krol left the Italian Serie A and Napoli and joined French second division side Cannes. Franco Causio left Udinese and joined Inter. Pietro Paolo Virdis left Udinese and joined Milan. Joe Jordan left Verona and joined Southampton. Oscar Damiani left AC Milan and joined New York Cosmos, eventually Parma and Lazio. And now he's an agent, I think.
Yep.
Luciano Spinozzi left Milan and joined Cesena. Patrizio Sala left Fiorentina and joined Cesena as well. Cucuredu left Fiorentina and joined Novara.
It was over.
Beccalosi finally left Inter and joined Sampdoria. Dircio left Napoli to join Ascoli.
Ascoli, yes.
As
journeyman.
Yes. Patrizio Hernandez also left Torino to join Ascoli. Selvaggi left Torino to join Udinese. And finally, Di Bartolomei left Roma to join Lidholm at Milan.
That was a very bad moment for everybody. He didn't want to leave. He never really accepted it. The fans the same, but with Lidholm leaving, with a new coach like Sven-Goran Eriksson, we was playing a completely different kind of game, faster with people running, while Di Bartolomei was, let's say, playing libero, moving to midfield, but it was very slow. So it was fine for Lidholm, was not fine for anybody else. But he really never accepted that. But you know what? When he was at Milan, he scored a goal and really started to cheer. For like 2 years, Roma fans insulted him and then they forgave him. But it took years to forgive him.
Yeah.
So
obviously, sad ending that we discussed last time.
Yeah.
As far as Juventus' season, I would say Juventus' title win was deserved. We can always speculate whether if Roma was not in Champions Cup, would it be closer. But at the time, Platini just seemed to be on fire. And just a few weeks later, he would even reach greater heights by winning the European Championship with France and scoring 9 goals. So he was at the top form of his life at this point.
We can consider Platini at the Euro 84 like Maradona at World Cup 86. He won alone.
Yes.
He had a good team, not a great team around him.
This was his greatest season as a footballer. He reached his peak. And after that, he slowly dropped down with age and everything. Remember, at the time, I think he was like 28, 29. So this is during the days where if you're 30 years old, you're already considered old, especially in Serie A. This would be the last season before the major Stranieri invasion. Because in the following season, again, you had Maradona, Rummenigge, Junior, Socrates, and on and on and on. Souness, Wilkins, Haitley. The Serie A would be even a greater league for the following season. Your perspective is more as a Lazio fan, and I'm assuming you just had the satisfaction of them being back in Serie A. Yeah. Do you still see football from the eyes of a child, or were you more of a serious fan, or?
Unfortunately, I think I see this kind of things in the same way. The problem is that there's football that has changed, not the fans. That's the problem. Well, I can't speak for the very young fans, that grew up with social media and things like this. But for all people that I believe that are over 35, we all see football in the same way. It's football that has changed a lot.
Yeah.
And it's not made for the fans anymore. It's made for, also because in Italian we don't call them fans, we call them tifosi.
Tifosi, yes.
Means that,
the fevered ones.
The fevered one means that we are sick in a good sense for the team. A fan is a lower level in some way. Today you can be a fan of Liverpool, Real Madrid, living in Italy, because at the same time you can watch all the games, you can follow every day what they do. at the time, we didn't know anything about what was going on. I could read about the football association at the time. Was like once a week on Guerin Sportivo, maybe something else. I didn't know anything about what was going on. I could like a team. I used to love Kenny Dalglish, always looking for a picture about him and things. I didn't know anything. Today, you have a kid that can grow up and be a fan of Real Madrid or Barcelona or Liverpool or Arsenal, whatever. Because if you don't live in a big city and you live, I don't know, maybe you're from Reggio Calabria, more than 1 million people maybe living there, but they have no team. So what's the difference of being a fan of AC Milan, Juventus, or Liverpool or Manchester United? Doesn't really change. So it was also a language barrier that almost doesn't exist anymore, especially with the young people. So, but whatever. I don't like to look at the things like I'm nostalgic, but I don't want to look at the things in this way. The only thing that I really don't like, and we were discussing this, is today's the lack of competition. Yeah. Today it's unthinkable to see a list of teams. Okay, you got Juventus on top, but then you have Fiorentina, Torino, Verona, Roma, Udinese. That's how it should work. Maybe next year, other 5 teams, whatever. In some way, this year, I like the Premier League because you can see Leicester being up there, Everton being up there. It makes it a lot more interesting for everybody. Maybe the big teams don't like this. Who cares? I know a lot of Juventus fans. They're not happy of having won 9 Scudetto. Yeah. Because now the Scudetto have lost completely.
I know what you mean. Yeah. I know exactly what you mean.
And without the real strong competition, they're not going to win the Champions League. Because if you don't get trained hard by the games in your league, you're not going to win the Champions League. That's some of the point.
It's not even about the Champions League. It's just the entertainment in your local league, just the competition.
Well, like, what's the point? Okay, you won 9 times. Then 10, 11, 12, what? What is this?
Yeah, back in those days, just to repeat as champions was such a significant achievement.
But, an example, we're starting to look like the Scottish Premier League. But at least there it makes sense because you have Celtic and Rangers from the capital, let's say, and that's it. That the other are all small towns. Here you're talking about big cities. They're not winning anything ever because the system is built around 1 team, possibly 2 or 3, and that's it. Mm-hmm. There's no other way to rebalance at the moment the system unless you go a little bit American with things like salary cap, luxury tax, a limit to the number of players you can enroll, or that you can loan. Because another problem is that maybe you have a 25 players in your list, but then you had other 50 players. You own other 50 players. You're basically draining talent from everywhere. So and they buy them when they're like 17, 18, 19. So a small team from a small city cannot even grow its own talent because big teams are buying them when they're 17, 18 because they can buy all of them. That didn't happen, and that was a lot better also for the talents because now they're not playing. So maybe for a matter of character, you're preventing some talents from blossoming. Yeah. So it's and you can see the list of the Italian national team that is doing great in some way. You know what? I may know 7, 8 players out of 11. That's true. And honestly, I read Gazzetta dello Sport every day. I follow the games and everything else. I may know who they are, but I have no clue about some of them. That's not normal.
That's problem everywhere.
I remember this season. This was I think the first full season. I think I told you before. I started following soccer as far as results and everything. Maybe this year before. But this was the first season that I started following from the start. So this is the first full season that I was following every result every week and kind of lived this season fully in some ways. Just was lucky if once in a while they had some highlights on TV. So in that sense, it's a memorable season as a growing football fan at that age. I was 10 going 11 that season. It's a memorable season in that sense. And just looking at the players and the stars on each team, there's a lot of decent players. Enjoyed following it closer with this podcast and your perspective as a witness.
I think this looks like the start as well of a real golden age for Serie A as well, with those players being imported, because that wasn't happening in England or Germany or even Spain to the same extent. And Serie A was obviously, once Maradona's there as well, I think Platini, Zico, Maradona, you'd have the best three players in the world, and then a whole host of others, Socrates, Junior, behind them as well. So even though the national team, as we've discussed, wasn't having a great time, Serie A itself was really establishing itself, I think, as Europe's great league at the time.
Well, I think also that basically Serie A became the first globalized league, Europe, because like England was very self-centered. Bundesliga did not consider itself as a league really open and advanced. Spain just got out 10 years before from a dictatorship. The reason had a coup in 1982. So it was a very peculiar situation. In some way, what made great Serie A, later it killed it, because let's say Serie A said, okay, we're big, we're great. And they didn't understand how we were supposed to change to keep that level, which is exactly what the English Premier League did, changing completely the landscape.
Well, that's a different discussion, but obviously the Bosman ruling had an effect on that, kind of evened out the terms, but that's another debate. What other thoughts you got for this season? What other memories that stand out?
Oh, to me, absolutely. Watching Zico every day. I was waiting at the 6 p.m. on a Sunday. There was a TV show called the Novantesimo Minuto.
Yes.
Providing all the highlights. And I was there just to see what Zico did. Because Platini was great, but Zico was mighty. Zico was a god. Football. So, and also you could see Platini playing around, because, with the French national team, we were more used to him. Having Zico jumping from Flamengo in Brazil to Udinese was just incredible. And really, the way he was scoring was also incredible. So, and then see him playing together in a crazy way with Causio and Mauro, it was wonderful. Honestly, it was really something new that we never had the chance to see before, because we always had great players in Italy, but that kind of technique was something new in the league, really.
Were you surprised that he joined Udinese, Franco? Were there other teams interested in him, or was it because of the quota on foreign players that the other teams had already got their players established?
Let's say that Roma was interested in Zico, but the president Dino Viola maybe didn't want to spend that money. Lazio the same. The point is that Udinese's president was a very smart guy. He used his own factories, his own brand, Zanussi, washing machines, these kind of things. Let's say he made a movement on money in Brazil in a different way, to go around with taxes and everything else. He found the right deal with Flamengo that was worth for both Udinese, for Flamengo, and for Zico as well. And when I say Zico, it's that because Zico then he ended a little bit in troubles with the Italian tax agency.
Oh, the following season, yeah, that's another story. Yeah.
One of the reasons why he left Italy. Well, the same for Diego Maradona. Maradona, until a few years ago, every time he was coming to Italy, he could find the financial police at the airport sizing something like a golden Rolex and things like this. Or if he was going to get paid by a TV, the police was going to the TV, telling the TV, look, you got to give the money to us and not to him. It is what it is.
How about you, Paul? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I just really enjoy looking back at these seasons with Franco, because, as he said, in England we didn't really get the chance to see these players and these teams unless they were playing an English team in the European club competitions, or obviously the Italian players representing the national team. And it's really interesting to look back and see the strength of this league and the quality of players going right down the league as well.
With that, once again, we would like to thank Mr. Franco Spicciariello for his participation in this series. As always, feel free to leave questions and comments. You may contact me on this blog, on Facebook under Soccer Nostalgia, and on Twitter I'm at SP1873. Mr. Paul Whittle can be contacted on his blog, the 1888 Letter. Also on Twitter, he's at 1888 Letter. You may follow the podcast on Spotify under Soccer Nostalgia Talk Podcast. Mr. Spicciariello's contact info on Twitter, he's at SPICCIAR.
As you can see here in the video.
Yes. So, and again, this information is always listed on the Spotify and the blog posting. So, Franco, thank you once again for your unique perspective on Italian football. We always enjoy it.
Thank you, Sean, for driving all this. It's, the work that you do with your Soccer Nostalgia blog, it's just incredible. Really incredible. Thank you, Paul, as well.
Appreciate
Absolutely.
that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Franco.